Today is the yahrzeit, the 60th yahrzeit of Rebbetzin Chana Schneerson, the Rebbe's mother. So I'd like to begin to verbringen with a little history of the Rebbetzins life. The Rebbetzin was born, talking about Rebbetzin Chana, in 1880 in Nikolaev. She was born there because her father, Reb Meir Shlomo Yanovsky, was the rabbi, one of the rabbis in Nikolaev. Her Zayda, who wrote the Shara Koilel, Reb Avram David Lavut, was the previous Rav in Nikolaev. And when he passed on, his son-in-law, Reb Meir Shlomo, took over. So she grew up in a family of great scholarship. And this is important to know and to understand. I'll tell you why. Amongst great men and women within the Jewish world, within the Torah world, each one has their cup of tea. The household of the Lavuts, Yanovskis, and the Schneersons, this particular Schneerson, Rebbetzin Chana, became a Schneerson by marrying Reb Leivik. There was a tremendous amount of scholarship. In other words, I'm not talking now about what we call tzidkis, holiness. That's a different story. That's also true, but there was, in Hebrew, there's a word, a malumid or a malumedes, an educated person. They were educated people, not only in the field of Torah, but in other fields as well. And I don't say this, just as a chassid who has to feel that way, has to say it. No, I'm talking now historically. And I'll give you just a few examples. The Rebbetzin Chana was well versed in digduk, in Hebrew grammar. How many of us over here at this table know digduk very well? I'll admit I don't know it well, even though I went to Lubavitch Yeshiva High School with Rabbi Garfinkel and Rabbi Lezevnik, and we had in high school a class on Hebrew, and I remember what they taught me: eti, neti, u. Ani, ata, it's all nice, but I really don't know Hebrew dikduk well enough. The Rebbetzin Chana knew Hebrew dikduk well. Number two, she spoke Hebrew well. Now, you're talking about a woman, late 1800s, 1880 to 1900, 1910, and is scholarly in the Hebrew language, to speak it, to understand it. That was a novelty. And it was even a greater novelty in these type of homes, because there's too much to say, but just, we'll say it briefly. Generally, Hasidim in particular, even Litvische, the more from Hasidim and Litvische, Litvaks, were very much against the Hebrew language and the knowledge of the Hebrew language. I'm not talking about Lashon Kodesh, Torah language, because it smelled and smacked of Zionism, right? Zionism was treif. So anyone that dabbled in that field was a suspect, okay? So here you're talking about a woman who knows this and knows it well. This was a novelty. Another example. The Rebbe had a cousin. His name was Avram Shalansky. He came to Eretz Yisrael and he became a very famous poet. Has anyone heard of this Rebbe cousin Shalansky? So he wrote his memoir, and it was translated, and I read lots of it. And there especially is a part there, he tells over kind of inside the cheder, inside what's going on. He lived in this, his parents lived in the same building as Reb Leivik. I think even on the same floor. They were cousins. I don't remember right now how they were cousins. They were cousins. So he tells over that he would go into the house and play with the three boys, the Rebbe and his two brothers. And when he went into the room, what do you see? What do you see in kids' rooms? Even in frum kids' rooms, Baruch Hashem, they don't have rock stars on the wall. Yeah, okay. You know what the Rebbe and his brothers had on the wall? Can anyone guess? Rifo, my dear Chabad, could you guess what the Rebbe had on the wall? No. Astronomy charts. Astronomy charts. That's scholarship. That's education. Not that we should. There was a cleverness. Let's use another word, a sophistication of Torah values expressed also in the sciences and cultures of the world that the family had. And in particular, Rebbetzin Chana, more than Reb Leivik. Reb Leivik was a great Rav and a Makupel and a Tzaddik. And who runs the home? We all know the mama, the mother. So, because she came from education, she educated her sons. And Shalansky tells over how another thing that was very emphasized in their home was negina, Hasidic songs, Hasidische nigunim. Why? Well, Yanovskis were Levium. And I believe someone told me, I didn't have a chance to check it, that Rabbi Avram Lavut was also a Levi. Does anyone know? But that's what I was told. I think so. Levium Beshira, right? What's the avoid of Levium? Song. So that's just, they were Levium. But in addition to that, they were composers of Lubavitch and Nigunim. And we'll sing one of those Nigunim in a moment, because you all know the Nigun. You probably don't know that it was composed by the Rebbetzin Chana's Zayda, Rabbi David Lavut. So Negina too, what's Negina? What's Hasidic song? It comes from a refinement. The Frierdiker Rebbe writes in a Sikha, he says like this, Der was hot nit, I'll translate in a moment. Der was hot nit, kein chush in Negina, hot nit kein chush in Chassidus. The one that doesn't have an expertise, a talent of Negina is lacking a real talent in understanding Chassidus. And I want to tell you, my friends, I was, besides a Talmud, a Ben Bais by Rabbi Yoel Khan, and I saw firsthand how this individual, with all of his genius, but Negina was such an important part. And when he sang a niggin, it wasn't just singing a niggin. Every tnua, every movement was emphasized. Every movement had a meaning. There was a before and an after. And you know where was the kind of hotbed of Chabad Negina? The city of Nikolaev. Why Nikolaev? She'll say because Rabbi Avram David Lavut and the Yanovskis were there and they were great Bali Managdim, they were great. It's more than that. Rabbi Yoel told me once like this. It's a famous word, but he told it to me once. There were two types of Chassidim. There were Chassidim that came from a city called Kremenchuk, which is in Ukraine today, right? And they went to the Rebbe and they came back. And the Chassidim came from Nikolaev, the Charatonovs, the Altoizes, Those families came from Nikolaev, Yanovskis, and they came back. They went to the Rashab, they went to the Marash, the Tzemach Tzedek, and they came back. Rabbi Yoel said that when Kremetchuker Chassidim, who were known as great maskilim, great intellectuals in the study of Chassidus, would come back, the people would ask them, "Was ist gewesen der Divra Maschel von Maimer?" What was the opening paragraph, the opening line, the opening posik, the opening chazal of the Maimer that the Rebbe said? In other words, what enamored them? What caught their attention? The Maimer, the Chassidus, the intellectualism, the depth. When a Chassid came back from Nikolaev, you know what the Chassidim in Nikolaev would say, from the Rebbe, they would say, "Was macht der Rebbe? Wie fühlt sich der Rebbe? How's the Rebbe feeling? How's the Rebbe doing?" They weren't so interested in the Maimer. They were interested in the actual physical health, stamina of their Rebbe. Nikolaev was a very, he used the word emotional type of a atmosphere for Chabad Chassidim. Kremetchuk was more of the intellectual. You had what was called the Beralach, the Geraris. There's a lot to say, and time is short, and there's too much to talk about. So but general, it's like saying the Hasidim from Rabbi Rosenfeld's community in Pittsburgh are a certain style. The Hasidim from Chveis HaShliach in Florida, who has an Anash community, are another style. Right? Every community has a culture. And by the way, this is something that I've written about extensively, and people don't pay attention enough to this. The culture. You are what your culture is. What culture were you raised in? What culture did you adapt? What is your culture? And the culture makes a big difference. Like Rafal, my dear friend Rafal here, who came from Borough Park, he told me years ago, there's no place like Borough Park. Rabbi Rosenfeld also grew up in Borough Park. I also grew up, right? I don't know about him. I like Borough Park, but the way Rafal said it to me was very interesting, and he's not a Borough Parker boy. I think you're from Manhattan, Rafal, or something. Bronx. Okay, a Bronx. Every place has its culture. Rebbetzin Chana was raised in Nikolaev. And Rebbetzin Chana had parents and grandparents who were very pneumistic Hasidim, deep inner Hasidim, who they in addition to everything else, they had feelings and warmth. And Rabbi Roosevelt mentioned, I want to just take off on this for 1 second, because I don't know if anyone picked up on that. You heard what he said, that the Rebbe put his hand under his mother and walked with her. Now, if I ask you, why did the Rebbe do that? What would you say? What would you say? She was an older woman, right? Even in 1947 when she came, I think she was already in her 60s. She was born in 1880, right? In 60s. An older woman, you put your hand, and then 70s, 80s for sure. And that's true. But I think it's a lot deeper, and it's much. The Russian Chassidim Bechlal, and I saw this, my father was a Russian Chassid, and I saw this by the Russian Chassidim. Really, I saw it by them. Let me tell you a story within a story to understand this. I was once in the home of a Yid named Reb Mendel Shem Tov. The Kronites know, right? He happens to be, my father was Reb Chaim Serebransky. He was his cousin. They grew up together like best friends. Him, Motel Kozliner, and Mendel Shem Tov were like the best buddies when they were little boys in Russia. And they grew up together. So I went to talk to them. Anyway, in middle, the phone rings. And who was on the phone? His sister, Basya Azimov. Rabbi Azimov from France, the main shliach over there. My dear friends, if you saw and heard the way he went to that telephone and said, Basya, my Tayerke, was machst du? Basya, my love, my dear one, how are you feeling? The love and connection went through the telephone. I saw it with my own eyes. I heard it. The Nikolayev Chassidim were this way, and Rebbetzin Chana grew up in this culture. So when you think about that, when the Rebbe puts his hand under his mother, that is the same warmth that those Nikolayev Chassidim had. And it's not as though, oh, my mother is old, my mother shouldn't trip, I'm going to now put my hand under her. And that's a side benefit. It doesn't begin there. It begins with the Ava Nafshis, the soul love. That's the experience. So, just to continue on for another few moments about the Rebbetzins' history, she had a very hard life. Rabbi Rosenfeld mentioned before, her memoirs, it's really a chiyuv, an obligation to everyone here to read that cover to cover in Yiddish, Hebrew, English, maybe it's in other languages. It's a must read. It's an original diary. We call that in writing. Dr. Moritz, what do we call that in writing? You're a writer. A primary source. Not a secondary, a primary source. Seldom do we have primary sources. I just got back from Cincinnati. I researched at the American Jewish Archives to find primary sources. Because much of what we write and what we read, frankly, are Bubba-Mises. Baloney stories. Unless you have authentication from an honest person who, either experienced it or heard it, or you find a source. And there's not, especially today, people have gone on in things that I write about, who can I talk to? So when Rabbi Karp was in Florida and I met him there, I sat with him and I took the time. I want to hear from a person like Baruch Hashem, he's no youngster, and he was around. So I listened. Rafal Eisenberg is older. Rabbi Rosenfeld. In other words, the people with the white beards on one hand, you can say, oh, they're over the hill. and the youngsters feel that way, right? The truth is, we need youngsters very much. The future, which this yeshiva gives, the future for Lubavitch. At the same time, the elders are an anchor. The elders are so important. My Chabad, Reb David here, we grew up, Reb David Fried and I grew up from second grade on in Lubavitch Yeshiva in Bedford and Dean, before Ocean Parkway. Second grade, little boys, we grew up together in Yeshiva. So the primary, so the Rebbetzin Chana's, this is what I was getting here, her diary is a primary source, so I really encourage you to read it, okay? So she if you read the diary, she had a very hard life. I'm sorry, until she came to America in 1947. And she would say, I think she even writes it, I think. She says in her diary, my best years are here in America because I have my son with me. And again there, I if I may say so, it wasn't because I have my son, the Rebbe. Of course he's a Rebbe. And he's our Rebbe, and he's the Rebbe. It's her son. Do you understand? The humanity is so important. That's what I'm getting at. There's a humanity here that makes this real. And the same is true, by the way, in our own lives. Children, grandchildren. What are youth looking for? To be real. To be real. Someone once said, came to Lubavitch back in the 70s, 60s, 70s with the hippies and the gurus and the Buddhism. And some of you tasted that, right? What did they see? Actually, Rafal told me something that I always repeat. I asked Rafal once at my table, he would come quite often to eat with us. And I asked him, what got you? I don't know, Rafal, have you told these chevra? They don't know anything, huh? What enamored you about the Rebbe? This is a product of the 60s, like, what did you see in the Rebbe? And you know what he told me? May I share it? He said, I saw in the Rebbe, I don't know if he used the words, but someone sitting on a dais with 3,000 people all around. Lahavdil reminded him of the gurus over there in whatever, in India, wherever he went. Right? Malchus. Everyone is turned on a different way to Torah, mitzvahs. Of course, at the end of the day, it's the neshama. Rebbetzin Chana had a hard life, and she comes to America. I'm talking about that, after Reb Levi passed away in 1944, she was devastated. And this is also in a primary source by someone named Reb Shmuel Nimoiten, who helped the Rebbe's parents. And after Reb Levi passed away, he helped the Rebbetzin Chana. And I have his memoir as well. Hopefully it'll come out one day as a book. So he says there that the Rebbetzin didn't want to go out. She stayed in her little hut. Now we would call that, depression. Call it whatever you want. I don't know, today we're labels, depression, melancholy, mental illness. She was to herself. Another thing with Russian Yidden, they hate taking. I saw this with my father-in-law. He would never ask for anything till the end. They hate taking. They hate asking for themselves. So she didn't ask anyone. And Reb Shmuel went to her and he said, Rebbetzin, he says, "Ihr müsst fahren. You have to leave. And ich habe gekauft a bilet. And I bought you a ticket. Please take it." And he thought she was going to give him a hard time. She doesn't want to take the free ticket. The circumstances were so difficult that she agreed. And she took the ticket, and then she went out with the shalom, with all the Lubavitchers, and came to the DP camp. This is a hard life. Her husband was young, such a goin, and the starvation. Rabbi Yoel told me things that he heard from the Rebbetzin Chana, because him and his wife would speak to her a lot. He told me, Mamish, there was no food for Shabbos. He opened up whatever the equivalent of the refrigerator was. There was nothing there. Shabbos was coming. And he told me that she told him once, it was an hour before Shabbos, and Ableivik is pacing back and forth. I forget now. And she says to him, Leivik, or Reb Leivik, how she called him, or my man, they said my man, my husband, out of respect. Wir haben nicht auf Shabbos, Kiddush, Challah, Epis. And she said it with a very great pain. And I believe it stops. I don't remember now the Chazal. He quoted a Chazal, I forget now. I think that Shabbos itself is Makadish, that Shabbos itself becomes the Kiddush. And he continued walking back and forth. Do you understand the poverty? We should never understand it. We don't understand it. And we should never want to understand it. But that's the life that they had. This was very, very difficult for them. Very difficult. So she comes to America, and Baruch Hashem, she gets from 47 to 64, gets those years, the good years. So it's in this background that this special woman who gave us our Rebbe, right? The Mama Ruchel, right? Ruchel Imenu. In Bethlehem, where we go to daven, this is our Mama Chana. So it's a special occasion, Yuschus Michol, that it's Yom Aledes, that we have a Fabringen to say L'chaim, to sing a Niggin, and they should help Taka that we should have only Psuras Tevis, Nakmar Sima Teva, L'chaim.